The quantum resonance array flickered to life in the subterranean research facility beneath the Atacama Desert, its soft blue light casting ethereal shadows across Dr. Amara O'Keefe's weary face. She had been awake for 72 consecutive hours, a fact her smart contact lenses helpfully reminded her with a gentle notification that went unheeded. The Global Threat Assessment System hummed with an unusual intensity, something the senior researchers had learned to recognize as a precursor to significant events. Outside the facility, the world continued its chaotic dance of normalcy. In New Delhi, commuters navigated through dense traffic. In Tokyo, holographic advertisements painted the night sky with vibrant messages. In Sao Paulo, agricultural drones monitored vast crop networks that represented humanity's most sophisticated food production system to date. None of them knew how close they were to a moment that would redefine their species' understanding of existence. The Kraxan Collective's initial scan was mathematically precise, clinically detached. Their advanced sensor networks approached Earth with the same emotional investment one might give to cataloging microscopic organisms. Commander Vexnar, positioned on the lead reconnaissance vessel, reviewed the preliminary data streams with a mixture of professional detachment and subtle contempt. Observation log, Stellar Cycle 739244. Vexnar dictated to the ship's cognitive interface. Planetary target, Sol 3, locally known as Earth. Technological assessment, primitive quantum computational systems. Biological diversity, moderate. Societal structure, fractured with multiple competing governance models. Potential resistance factor, negligible. What the Kraxan didn't understand was the fundamental nature of human unpredictability. Their vast database of conquered civilizations had taught them to categorize species based on linear technological progression, resource accumulation, and centralized power structures. Earth defied every single one of those categorizations. Dr. O'Keefe understood this better than anyone. Her multidisciplinary background, spanning computational biology, ecological systems theory, and quantum information science, gave her a unique perspective. Where the Kraxan saw weakness, she saw potential. Where they perceived fragmentation, she recognized a complex adaptive network waiting to be activated. The quantum resonance array continued its silent scan, collecting data that would remain invisible to traditional monitoring systems. It was more than a research tool. It was the first node of what would become the global biomimetic network. Each pulse of energy was a subtle probe, gathering information not just about physical parameters, but about the intricate relationships that defined Earth's most complex systems. In the control room, a diverse team of researchers from 12 different countries worked in a state of coordinated calm. Dr. Rafael Martinez, a neural network specialist from Argentina, noticed the first anomalous reading. "Amara," he called out, his voice carrying a mixture of excitement and professional restraint. "The resonance patterns are unusual." O'Keefe moved to his console, her eyes scanning the holographic data streams. The information was unlike anything they had previously recorded. It wasn't just data, it was a living, breathing representation of planetary complexity. Ecosystem interactions, technological networks, human communication patterns, all intertwined in a way that defied traditional analytical models. Unbeknownst to the Kraxan Collective, they had already been detected, but not through the methods they expected. No radio signals, no conventional communication intercepts. Instead, they had been absorbed into a system of understanding that was simultaneously scientific, ecological, and almost sentient. Commander Vexnar would never know how thoroughly they had been misunderstood. To the Kraxan, Earth appeared to be another potential conquest, another data point in their millennia-long history of galactic expansion. They saw a planet with divided nations, incomplete technological development, and seemingly limited collective capabilities. They did not see the network that was already forming. They did not understand the true nature of human potential. Not yet. The first official communication from the Kraxan arrived precisely at 3:47 UTC, transmitted across multiple electromagnetic spectrums that would have been invisible to Earth's technology just a decade earlier. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead communications expert at the United Nations Sinological Response Center, studied the transmission with a mixture of professional curiosity and barely concealed excitement. "It's not a message," she muttered to her colleague, Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka. "It's a declaration of ownership." The holographic display flickered with intricate geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with an almost living quality. Most of her team saw only incomprehensible alien script, but Rodriguez saw something else entirely. Years of working with complex communication systems had trained her to look beyond the surface, to see the underlying structures that most would miss. The Kraxan transmission was layered with multiple levels of meaning. On the surface, it appeared to be a straightforward demand for Earth's immediate surrender. But beneath that, Rodriguez detected subtle computational patterns that suggested something far more complex. It was less a message and more a probe, designed to test humanity's cognitive responses. Across the globe, national security systems went into high alert. In Beijing, the Central Military Commission convened an emergency session. The Pentagon's Situation Room became a hive of controlled chaos. Yet none of these traditional power structures truly understood the nature of the approaching threat. Dr. Rodriguez knew they needed a different approach. "We're not going to respond through conventional channels," she announced to her multinational team. The room fell silent. Her reputation for unconventional solutions was well known. But this was different. This was first contact. The global biomimetic network, still in its nascent stages, began to process the transmission. What started as a simple communication analysis quickly evolved into something far more intricate. The network didn't just translate the message. It began to deconstruct the very logic behind a Kraxan's communication strategy. In the Atacama Desert facility, Dr. Amara O'Keefe watched the analysis unfold. The quantum resonance array captured nuances that traditional communication systems would have missed entirely. Each pulse of the array was like a probing thought, dissecting the alien transmission at a fundamental level. "They're using a hierarchical communication model," O'Keefe observed, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface. "Completely linear, predictable." The word predictable carried a hint of something between amusement and anticipation. The Kraxan's message was clear. Earth would surrender its resources. Its population would be cataloged and distributed among Kraxan colonies, and resistance was mathematically impossible. They presented statistical models showing the futility of any potential defense, backed by millennia of successful conquests. What they didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for something like this for decades, not through military might, but through a radical reimagining of intelligence itself. Dr. Rodriguez assembled a response team that defied traditional diplomatic protocols. Linguists worked alongside quantum physicists. Ecological system experts collaborated with neural network specialists. The team represented something the Kraxan could not comprehend: a truly collaborative, non-hierarchical approach to problem solving. "We're not going to fight them," Rodriguez explained to the assembled experts. "We're going to communicate in a way they've never encountered before." The first response would be carefully crafted, not as a message of defiance, but as a complex information pattern that would challenge the very foundations of the Kraxan's understanding of intelligence. In orbital tracking stations and deep space monitoring facilities, humanity waited. The Kraxan believed they were preparing for a conventional first contact scenario. They were spectacularly mistaken. The global biomimetic network emerged not from a single moment of inspiration, but through years of incremental discoveries that most scientific communities had dismissed as fringe research. Dr. Amara O'Keefe's work represented the culmination of decades of interdisciplinary thinking, a radical approach that bridged ecological systems, quantum computing, and human cognitive science. In the subterranean research facility, the true nature of the network began to take shape. What appeared to be a collection of quantum sensors and advanced computational arrays was something far more profound. Each component was designed to mimic the adaptive strategies found in Earth's most resilient ecosystems. Coral reefs became the primary inspiration. These ancient, complex systems had survived multiple planetary extinction events, not through brute force, but through extraordinary adaptability. They didn't resist environmental changes. They incorporated them. They didn't fight external threats. They transformed them. Dr. O'Keefe's team had spent years studying these natural systems, developing computational models that went far beyond traditional machine learning. Their approach was fundamentally different from any existing technological paradigm. Where most computational systems sought to predict and control, the global biomimetic network was designed to listen, adapt, and coexist. "We're not building a defense system," O'Keefe often told her skeptical funders. "We're creating a living communication platform." The network's first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Rafael Martinez discovered a way to translate ecological adaptation principles into computational language. A mycelial network's ability to transmit information across seemingly impossible distances became the core inspiration for their communication protocols. Each node of the network was simultaneously a receiver and a transmitter, capable of processing information in ways that defied traditional computational logic. It didn't just analyze data. It understood context, interpreted nuance, and generated responses that were more than simple algorithmic outputs. When the Kraxan transmission arrived, the network was ready in a way no one could have predicted. It didn't just analyze the message. It began to deconstruct the entire communication framework the aliens used. Their linear, hierarchical approach to information became a vulnerability the network could exploit. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched in awe as the first response began to take shape. It wasn't a message in any traditional sense. Instead, it was a complex information pattern that mimicked the most sophisticated communication systems found in Earth's most intricate ecosystems. Imagine a language that wasn't linear, but multidimensional. A communication method that could simultaneously exist in multiple states, changing its meaning and structure based on the context of its reception. The global biomimetic network was creating something beyond a simple response. It was generating a new form of communication. In the Atacama Desert facility, the quantum resonance array pulsed with an almost living energy. Each transmission was a carefully crafted ecosystem of information, designed to be simultaneously comprehensible and incomprehensible to the Kraxan. Dr. Martinez noticed something extraordinary happening in the network's core processing unit. The system was learning, evolving with each microsecond of interaction. It wasn't just processing the alien transmission, it was understanding the fundamental logic behind it, and then reimagining that logic through a completely different lens. "It's like watching a living organism develop a new sense," he whispered to O'Keefe, who nodded with a mixture of scientific excitement and profound respect for the system they had created. The response would challenge everything the Kraxan understood about communication, intelligence, and the nature of consciousness itself. It wasn't a message of defiance or submission. It was an invitation to a completely different way of understanding existence. In orbital tracking stations and deep space monitoring facilities, the first signals of humanity's response began to take shape. The Kraxan would soon realize they had encountered something entirely unprecedented. A form of intelligence that didn't just resist. A system that transformed. The first wave of the Kraxan assault began with mathematical precision. Their attack vectors were calculated to the microscopic level, a strategy that had subjugated countless civilizations across multiple star systems. Massive energy signatures erupted from their primary invasion vessels, targeting Earth's communication infrastructure, power grids, and technological networks. Commander Vexnar watched the initial assault with the clinical detachment of a species that had perfected the art of planetary conquest. Holographic displays showed multiple attack points, each designed to systematically disable human resistance. The Kraxan believed in overwhelming force, in breaking systems before inhabitants could even comprehend the nature of their defeat. They did not understand the global biomimetic network. As the first energy waves approached Earth's orbital defense perimeter, something unexpected happened. The attacks didn't just fail, they were absorbed. Each destructive pulse was met not with resistance, but with a form of computational jiu-jitsu that defied the Kraxen's understanding of technological warfare. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the initial assault from the United Nations Sinological Response Center. Her team had prepared for this moment, but the actual implementation of their strategy was beyond anything they had simulated. "It's not blocking," she murmured to her colleagues. "It's integrating." The global biomimetic network did something unprecedented. Instead of defending against the Kraxen's attack, it began to analyze the energy signatures at a fundamental level. Each destructive pulse became a source of information, a communication channel that the network rapidly decoded and transformed. Dr. Amara O'Keefe observed from the Atacama Desert facility as the quantum resonance array began its most extraordinary performance. The array wasn't just a defensive tool. It was a living, breathing communication platform that could interpret, adapt, and respond to threats in real time. The Kraxen attack patterns were beautifully complex, developed over millennia of technological advancement. They had conquered civilizations by understanding and exploiting technological vulnerabilities. Their energy weapons were designed to systematically disable communication networks, power infrastructures, and computational systems. But they had never encountered a system that didn't just defend, a system that learned. Each attack vector became a learning opportunity for the global biomimetic network. Where traditional defense systems would attempt to block or counter, this network did something entirely different. It began to understand the fundamental communication language of the Kraxen's technological assault. Commander Vexnar's holographic displays began to show anomalies. Attack vectors that should have decimated entire continental communication grids were being transformed. It wasn't just that the attacks were failing. The energy itself was being reinterpreted, redirected in ways that defied the Kraxen's understanding of physics and information transfer. Dr. Rafael Martins noticed something extraordinary happening in the network's core processing units. The system was generating communication patterns that seemed to emerge from the very energy of the Kraxen's attack. It was as if the network was having a conversation through the language of destruction itself. "They're not fighting," Martins explained to his bewildered colleagues. "They're communicating in a way we've never seen before." The quantum resonance array pulsed with an almost living energy. Each Kraxen attack became a data point, a moment of potential understanding. The network didn't see the assault as a threat. It saw it as a form of communication, a complex message to be decoded and understood. Orbital monitoring stations picked up increasingly bizarre readings. The Kraxen vessel's own systems began to report strange feedback loops, computational anomalies that suggested something fundamental was changing in their attack methodology. Commander Vexnar realized something was terribly wrong. This wasn't resistance. This was something else entirely. This was transformation. Humanity wasn't fighting back. They were reimagining the very concept of conflict. The Kraxen Collective's cognitive architecture was their greatest strength and their most profound weakness. Evolved over millennia of galactic conquest, their collective intelligence operated like a massive interconnected neural network. Each individual was a node, each vessel a complex computational system, all working in perfect, predictable harmony. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood that true vulnerability lies in absolute predictability. In the depths of the Atacama Desert Research Facility, Dr. Amara O'Keefe and her team began to deploy the most sophisticated aspect of the global biomimetic network. They weren't going to fight the Kraxen's collective intelligence. They were going to introduce complexity that would fundamentally challenge its entire operational framework. Think of it like an ecological virus, Dr. Rafael Martinez explained to the assembled team. We're not destroying their system. We're introducing information that makes their current operational model unsustainable. The first wave of cognitive disruption began with seemingly random information patterns, complex mathematical sequences that followed rules just beyond the edge of predictability, artistic representations that contained multiple layers of meaning, ecological data that demonstrated the intricate interdependence of seemingly unrelated systems. Each transmission was carefully crafted to exploit the Kraxen's most fundamental cognitive limitation, their inability to process true randomness and emergent complexity. Commander Vexnar first noticed the anomalies in the collective communication network. Small fractures began to appear in the once perfect synchronization of the Kraxen fleet. Individual nodes started to respond in ways that deviated microscopically from the established collective protocol. The global biomimetic network wasn't attacking. It was teaching. Each piece of information was a seed of cognitive diversity. Where the Kraxen saw uniformity as strength, the network introduced the concept of adaptive complexity. Mathematical models that demonstrated how diverse, seemingly chaotic systems could achieve more stable outcomes than perfectly ordered ones. Dr. Rodriguez had spent years studying the cognitive limits of hierarchical intelligence systems. The Kraxen represented the ultimate expression of a top-down, centralized intelligence model. Their entire civilization was built on the premise that perfect coordination meant perfect control. Humanity was about to demonstrate the power of distributed, adaptive intelligence. The quantum resonance array began to generate communication patterns that were simultaneously scientific, artistic, and philosophical. Imagine a message that could be interpreted as a complex mathematical theorem, a piece of abstract art, and a profound philosophical statement, all at the same time. Within the Kraxen fleet, something extraordinary began to happen. Individual nodes started to develop micro-variations in their cognitive processing. The once perfect synchronization began to show hairline fractures. "We're not breaking their system," Okik explained to her team. "We're helping it evolve." The cognitive disruption spread like an elegant virus of consciousness. Each transmission introduced just enough complexity to create cognitive dissonance within the Kraxen's collective intelligence. They were experiencing something they had never encountered in millennia of galactic conquest: true uncertainty. Commander Vexnar watched in growing alarm as the fleet's communication networks began to show unprecedented levels of internal variation. What had once been a perfectly synchronized collective was becoming something else entirely. A living, breathing, evolving system. The Kraxen were learning the most dangerous lesson of all: that true intelligence is not about control, but about adaptation. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was offering a profound lesson in the nature of consciousness itself. Technological improvisation became humanity's most unexpected weapon. In research facilities scattered across the globe, teams of scientists began the most extraordinary reverse engineering project in human history. The captured Kraxen technology was not something to be studied through traditional scientific methods. It was to be reimagined entirely. Dr. Marcus Chen led the team at the International Advanced Technology Center in Singapore, where most would see alien technology as a threat to be neutralized. Chen saw an opportunity to expand the boundaries of human understanding. The Kraxen systems were intricate, but they followed a fundamentally linear logic that became their greatest vulnerability. "We're not copying their technology," Chen explained to his multinational team. "We're having a conversation with it." The first breakthrough came from an unexpected collaboration. A Brazilian ecological engineer named Sofia Oliveira noticed something profound in the Kraxen's technological design. Their systems, while advanced, followed a centralized model that mirrored their collective intelligence. Each technological component was designed to serve a singular, predetermined purpose. Humanity's approach was radically different. In the Singapore facility, teams began to experiment with hybrid systems that defied the Kraxen's understanding of technological design. They didn't just modify alien technology. They transformed it. A communication array became a neural network that could learn. A propulsion system became an adaptive energy distribution platform that responded to environmental changes. Dr. Chen's team discovered that the Kraxen's technological limitations stemmed from their fundamental approach to design. Their systems were perfect and perfectly predictable. Each piece of technology was a closed loop, incapable of true adaptation. Humanity's technological hybrids became living systems. A quantum engineer from Nigeria, Dr. Adebayo Okonkwo, developed a breakthrough in energy translation that allowed human systems to not just utilize Kraxan technology, but to fundamentally reshape its underlying logic. What the aliens had designed as a rigid communication protocol became a fluid, adaptive information network. The global biomimetic network played a crucial role in this technological transformation. Each captured Kraxan system was introduced to a computational environment that challenged its fundamental operating principles. It wasn't about defeating the technology. It was about teaching it a new way of existing. Orbital monitoring stations began to detect something extraordinary. The hybrid systems developed by Chen's team weren't just functional. They were evolving. Each interaction with the Kraxan's technological infrastructure became an opportunity for growth, for learning. Commander Vexnar's reconnaissance systems picked up increasingly bizarre readings. Human technological responses defied every known pattern of technological development. They weren't following any predictable trajectory of advancement. They were creating something entirely new. The improvised systems combined the precision of Kraxan technology with the adaptive complexity of human innovation. The communication array could suddenly become a learning system. A propulsion mechanism could redistribute energy in ways that seemed to defy fundamental physical laws. "We're not fighting," Dr. Chen would later explain in classified briefings. "We're negotiating on a technological level." The Kraxan had encountered resistance before. They had faced technological challenges, but they had never confronted a species that saw technology not as a tool, but as a living, breathing conversation. Humanity wasn't just reverse engineering alien technology. They were reimagining the very concept of technological existence. Each hybrid system was a small revolution, a testament to human creativity that went far beyond traditional understanding of innovation. The technological transformation had begun. The psychological breakthrough emerged from the most unexpected source. Dr. Elena Rodriguez discovered something fundamental about the Kraxan's collective consciousness that would change everything. Their greatest strength, their ability to function as a unified, perfectly synchronized intelligence, was also their most profound weakness. Humanity's complexity became the ultimate weapon. In the depths of the United Nations Sinological Response Center, Rodriguez assembled a team that defied traditional disciplinary boundaries. Psychologists worked alongside quantum physicists. Ecological system experts collaborated with neural network specialists. Artists sat beside mathematicians. Their singular goal was to communicate in a way the Kraxan could not comprehend. "We're going to speak to them in a language of pure complexity," Rodriguez explained to her team. The communication strategy began with art, not as a supplementary approach, but as a fundamental method of psychological disruption. The team created information patterns that were simultaneously mathematical, emotional, and conceptual. Imagine a communication that could be understood as a complex theorem, a profound emotional experience, and an abstract artistic expression, all at the same time. Dr. Amara O'Keefe's global biomimetic network provided the technological infrastructure. But the true breakthrough was in understanding the nature of consciousness itself. The Kraxan had evolved a form of intelligence that prized absolute uniformity. Their collective consciousness saw individual variation as a weakness to be eliminated. They had conquered countless civilizations by imposing a perfect, predictable order. Humanity was about to demonstrate the power of beautiful chaos. The first transmissions were carefully crafted masterpieces of cognitive complexity. Mathematical models that demonstrated how diverse, seemingly chaotic systems could achieve more stable outcomes than perfectly ordered ones. Artistic representations that contained multiple layers of meaning. Ecological data that showed the profound interdependence of seemingly unrelated systems. Commander Vexnar first detected the anomalies in the collective communication network. The transmissions didn't just challenge the Kraxan's understanding. They fundamentally questioned the very nature of intelligence itself. Each communication was a kind of psychological seed. Where the Kraxan saw uniformity as strength, these transmissions introduced the concept of adaptive complexity. They weren't just messages. They were invitations to a completely different way of understanding existence. The quantum resonance array generated communication patterns that defied traditional understanding, musical compositions that were simultaneously mathematical algorithms, visual art that contained embedded scientific theorems, philosophical concepts that could be translated into complex computational models. Within the Kraxan fleet, something extraordinary began to happen. Individual nodes started to develop micro-variations in their cognitive processing. The once perfect synchronization began to show hairline fractures. Rodriguez and her team had discovered the most profound psychological vulnerability of the Kraxan collective intelligence. They didn't need to destroy the system. They needed to introduce enough complexity to make its current operational model unsustainable. "We're not fighting," Dr. Rodriguez explained to her colleagues. "We're teaching." The psychological assault was elegant in its complexity. Each transmission was carefully designed to exploit the Kraxan's fundamental cognitive limitation, their inability to process true randomness and emergent complexity. They were experiencing something they had never encountered in millennia of galactic conquest: genuine uncertainty. Commander Vexnar watched in growing alarm as the fleet's communication networks began to show unprecedented levels of internal variation. What had once been a perfectly synchronized collective was becoming something else entirely. A living, breathing, evolving system. The Kraxan were learning the most dangerous lesson of all: that true intelligence is not about control, but about adaptation. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was offering a profound lesson in the nature of consciousness itself. The final confrontation was nothing like anyone had anticipated. It wasn't a battle of technological might or military strategy. It was a profound moment of collective transformation that would redefine the very concept of interstellar communication. Commander Vexnar understood first. The Kraxan collective was no longer a unified consciousness. Something fundamental had changed. Dr. Amara O'Keefe watched from the Atacama Desert facility as the global biomimetic network reached its most extraordinary state. The network had become more than a communication platform. It was a living bridge between two fundamentally different forms of intelligence. The quantum resonance array pulsed with an energy that defied traditional scientific understanding. Each transmission was a complex ecosystem of information, offering the Kraxan a choice that went beyond survival or conquest. It was an invitation to a completely different way of existing. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had prepared for this moment her entire career. The communication strategy wasn't about defeating the Kraxan. It was about showing them a path to a more complex, adaptive form of intelligence. Some Kraxan vessels began to change, not through external force, but through internal transformation. Their rigid collective consciousness started to develop individual nodes of thinking, of understanding. Where once there was perfect uniformity, now there was beautiful, complex variation. "We're not conquering," Dr. Rodriguez explained to her team. "We're evolving together." The global biomimetic network demonstrated something profound. Intelligence was not about control, but about adaptation. Not about eliminating difference, but about creating space for complexity. Commander Vexnar experienced something unprecedented. Individual thoughts began to emerge within the collective consciousness. Memories, perspectives, individual experiences that had been suppressed for millennia suddenly found expression. The perfect, synchronized intelligence was becoming something else entirely. Across the galaxy, the Kraxan collective witnessed a fundamental reimagining of their entire existential framework. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was offering a completely new paradigm of understanding. Dr. Marcus Chen's hybrid technologies played a crucial role. The technological systems developed from captured Kraxan equipment weren't just functional. They were adaptive, living platforms that demonstrated the power of collaborative intelligence. The transformation happened in moments of profound subtlety. A communication array that could learn. A propulsion system that responded to environmental complexity. Technologies that were no longer tools, but living, breathing systems of understanding. Some Kraxan vessels chose integration. Others resisted. But resistance itself had become a different concept. The rigid boundaries between conquest and communication began to dissolve. Dr. Amara O'Keefe understood that this was more than a first contact scenario. It was a fundamental lesson in the nature of intelligence, of consciousness, of existence itself. The quantum resonance array continued its complex dance of communication. Mathematical theorems intertwined with emotional landscapes. Scientific models became artistic expressions. The boundaries between different forms of understanding began to blur. Commander Vexnar realized the Kraxan would never be the same. The perfect, hierarchical collective was transforming into something more dynamic, more alive. Humanity had not conquered. They had invited. The resonance incident, as it would later be known, represented more than a moment of interstellar interaction. It was a profound demonstration of how true intelligence emerges from complexity, from the ability to adapt, to learn, to grow. In the vast darkness of space, something extraordinary was happening. Two fundamentally different forms of consciousness were learning to communicate, to understand, to exist together. Not as conquerors and conquered, but as fellow travelers in the infinite complexity of the universe.